First off, another miner was killed on the job in a mine this week, the 41st this year. The most of that number died in that explosion at the Massey mine in West Virginia in April. How happy Massey's owner, Don Blankenship, must be that an oil gusher took the spotlight off him soon afterwards. Miners tried to drag some attention back this week, testifying in Congress and calling for action. Given the history of U.S. mine workers' organizations and unions, how miners are being treated these days is no insignificant thing. Organized miners led the way in securing things like the 8-hour day and federal labor protections. Does the grim state of today's coal fields tell us more than we really want to know about where power has shifted in the 21st century economy? We'll talk about that and more next with GRITtv commentator Jeff Biggers. But first this, Cecil Roberts, president of the United Mine Workers, testified Tuesday on Capitol Hill.
And if a 25-year-old miner who had not yet obtained a miner certificate knew he was working in a dangerous place, didn't everybody else know that? Didn't the CEO of this company know that? Didn't the mine foreman know that? Didn't everyone know this? He wrote a letter to his mother, and he had a one-year-old baby that I had the opportunity to meet at the memorial service in Beckley. And he said, tell my fiance, tell my baby that I love him and I love you, Mom. Those are the kind of letters we used to write when we was going to Vietnam. World War II, World War I, Korea, people going off to the Mideast to fight. You understand a young man writing those kinds of letters? That's the kind of letters we're supposed to write going to work.
Has going to work become like going to war? A good point from Cecil Roberts there. To you, Jeff. I mean, it's language like that, testimony like that, that does get you thinking about history and what's happened to that relationship between workers and wealthy owners in the coal fields.
You know, Laura, just from a historical perspective, during World War I, it was more dangerous to be in a coal mine in West Virginia than on the front lines there in Europe during some of the worst battlefields. And I think the metaphor of a war is something we've been talking about for a long time now in the coal fields across the country, that we are in the midst of a war situation, that the death toll is rising, both from underground and above ground mining. And it's really a situation that's reached an amazing level of crisis.
But that was before, World War I was before the passage of federal labor regulations, partly fought for by United Mine Workers. The situation today makes you wonder what happened to those regulations, what's happened to enforcement. Let's just start with Massey. We have OSHA, we have mine worker health and safety, investigations of what happened there in West Virginia in April. But what's happening? What's going on? Are we any wiser about what happened to take those 29 lives?
You know, we're really not. And I think we're reaching a situation that's almost like a debacle in terms of the investigation of the Upper Big Branch disaster. Just yesterday, an independent investigator who's with the West Virginia governor's office, McAteer, released his own report saying that it's going to take at least a year to find out what's happening, that he couldn't even get into the mine until June 24th because the conditions still are so bad. But I think more importantly, what we found out yesterday as well was a whistleblower from Massey, who actually lost his position, has come out to say that, in fact, one of the methane gas monitors was turned off 2 months ago in this same mine, which might have led to, in fact, one of the worst parts of this disaster. And this is a story, of course, that NPR broke last night.
Well, let's play a clip from McAteer speaking yesterday. Take a look.
Our best estimate, our best guess is that we're looking at the end of the year for any kind of, hopefully any kind of report. That is not comforting to the families, and we know that. It's unfortunate. We only have one chance to do this, and we're trying to do it right.
Trying to do it right. Do you have any confidence, Jeff?
Well, I think, we have some sense of trust, of course, that this is going to unfold in the right way. But once again, we don't have any real sense of urgency there in Washington to make sure we have mine safety that stops this whole situation of violations within the mine. The miner we lost last week in Southern Illinois, just up the holler from where my family's from, was the 41st miner to die, once again, in a mine that was full of incredible violations that MSHA had been denouncing for a long time. But instead of cracking down on the mine, we have to wait until we have a death to have some sort of action. And this, Laura, really, I think is symbolic of the whole wait and see or wait and die mentality about the Obama administration right now.
Now, that death that you just mentioned in Illinois in a town called Equality reminds you of the days when people named towns, things like that, was in a Peabody mine. And as you mentioned in a piece in the Huffington Post recently, Peabody just declared that they were opening a new massive strip mining facility in Mongolia to help the world's poor?
You know, it's incredible. I'm actually reporting now from coal country in Wyoming, where we have some of the largest strip mines in the nation. You know, last spring, the EPA announced, of course, they were going to be cracking down on mountaintop removal. And the next day, they green-lighted the largest strip mine in the nation. It's there in the Antelope Mine in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming. It was going to produce, it will produce over 430 million tons of coal, which is 3 times the annual production of all of West Virginia. And now Peabody has announced that they're going to be opening a mine that will even dwarf this Antelope mine there in Mongolia to feed, of course, the fuel needs of China and its coal-fired plants. That this is really becoming a world crisis in the coal fields, from Mongolia to Wyoming, of course, back into Appalachia and the heartland.
Well, just to remind people what some of that mountaintop removal looks like, take a look at this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. We can allow the land, water, and people of Appalachia to be sacrificed, or end mountaintop removal coal mining. Coal companies have already leveled more than 500 Appalachian ridges, but we can save the rest of America's oldest mountains and secure a clean, safe energy future.
There from ilovemountains.org. There's more information at our website. Jeff, 2 things. You mentioned EPA promises. The EPA made some promises around mountaintop removal. And, well, the EPA is also under attack for what's happening at Blair Mountain. Talk about that.
You know, in April 1st, of course, and it wasn't an April Fool's Day surprise, the EPA announced, of course, these new guidance rules that were really going to crack down on mountaintop removal. And Lisa Jackson, of course, the head administrator, announced that there would be no, or virtually no, more mountaintop removal or valley fields. But last week, the first action since that guidance rule, the EPA green-lighted a new mountaintop removal permit in West Virginia in the Pine Creek mine. And it completely devastated the coalfield region, because here's a community that's been relying on the EPA to stand by its word to stop on this incredibly destructive means of mining. And once again, Laura, we received less than 8% of our national coal production from mountaintop removal mining. We can completely eliminate it tomorrow, and we wouldn't need it. But Lisa Jackson backtracked on her word. And in fact, protesters connected to the Rainforest Action Network went to her office and had this incredible sit-in, and they literally broadcasted her own press conference into her office to remind her that she was betraying her own words and going back on her promises. And this is happening, of course, on Blair Mountain. Blair Mountain is considered the Gettysburg of the Union movement. It's where in 1921, thousands of coal miners and World War I veterans marched to liberate a county down in Mingo County and Logan County who weren't allowed to unionize. This was the largest armed insurrection in America since the Civil War. And these miners believed in human rights and workplace safety. And right now, that same Blair Mountain is being destroyed through mountaintop removal operation as the ultimate sign of disrespect to our coal miners in America today.
And we've only got 30 seconds, Jeff, but do you agree that the way we treat our miners, who once held such a position of esteem as workers in this country, is a reflection of how we're treating all workers these days?
Absolutely. The abuse of the miner is always connected to the abuse of the land, and the death toll is rising in many respects throughout the coal fields. Laura, we are in the midst of a coal field war, and the Obama administration and the state administrations need to come to grips with the fact that we have to do something soon. Laura, since April 5th, and the Upper Big Branch disaster, we have lost over 300 coal miners to black lung disease alone, and that should be
Got to keep paying attention to it. Jeff, thanks so much. We'll keep on the story with your help. Jeff Biggers, GRITtv commentator on the coal mines.